Good morning. Today is Monday, the 6th of July, and today we are in Mark's Gospel, chapter 9. We're going to look at verses 42 through 50 this morning. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life lame rather than having two hands to go to hell, into the fire that shall never be quenched, where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. And if your foot causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life lame rather than having 2 feet to be cast into hell, into the fire that shall never be quenched, where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with one eye than having 2 eyes to be cast into hellfire, where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. For everyone will be seasoned with fire, and every sacrifice will be seasoned with salt. Salt is good, but if the salt loses its flavor, how will you season it? Have salt in yourself, and have peace with one another. Jesus uses some very stark language here to warn against offenses, against sin. Drastic measures should be taken to avoid certain things. He starts here in this passage by warning against causing a young person who has faith in God to stumble. That's a warning to every teacher in our public school system, every Sunday school teacher who would lead a child astray. Anyone who has influence over children, over young people. You have a responsibility. You've been charged with a great responsibility to help shape the minds of young people. And Jesus warns explicitly here that anyone who causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better to have a millstone tied around your neck and thrown into the ocean. No thanks. Right? No. There's a phrase, there's a passage that he refers to 3 times here. In verse 46, verse 44, 46, and 48. And the word that he's talking about, he mentions hell. And it's the word Gehenna. And it's a term that refers to the rubbish pit outside of Jerusalem, where they would burn trash and whatnot. And it was maggots and rotten food, and it was an awful place, stench, and the worm. He says the worm dies not. In other words, this place is just a awful, rotten. The maggots. You've been around a carcass of a dead animal that you roadkill or whatever. You've come upon it, and the stench is vile. If you leave a package that contained raw meat in it or something, and you put it out in the trash, and for some reason, let's say your trash goes on Monday, and you put it in there on Tuesday. Well, by the next Monday in the summer heat, there are maggots, and it stinks. And that's the picture here. That's the picture. It's grotesque. And he says, you'd be better off to cut off your hand and go into life eternal than to be thrown into a place like that with both hands. That's the image. And of course, my personal belief is that he's using hyperbole to get across a message. He's not advocating for us to amputate our hands and our feet and pluck our eye out of our head. But he's saying, in contrast to going to hell, you'd be better off. And so that's the message here. And what's the application? How do we apply this? Well, I think they're just in general terms. If you're struggling with sin in your life, you do whatever you have to do to avoid it. Habitual sin especially. Think about just in practical terms, we have a culture that is inundated with alcohol, and now marijuana use, CBD, is everywhere, and other stronger drugs everywhere, opiates. And so we know that these things can lead to addiction. Well, what do? There's a point where it can destroy your life, your livelihood. How do you get victory? How do you get deliverance from these types of things? Well, there's steps. You need to avoid the places where you would go to replenish that supply. You need to avoid going to the bar after work with the buddies. If you struggle with alcohol and you're an alcoholic, don't go down that aisle at the store. Don't drive past the bar on the way home. Take a different route. Leave your cash at home. Leave your debit card. Whatever measures you have to do. Have an accountability partner. There's all kinds of steps that can be taken, that should be taken. And is it easy? No, it's never easy. But that's the point Jesus is making here, is that whatever drastic measures you need to take to avoid condemning yourself, destroying your life, that's what you have to do. He mentions the hands, the things we do. He mentions the feet, the places we go. He mentions the eyes, the things we look at. I would say you could apply it to other areas of your life too. The things you listen to, the things you eat. Um, it's just have whatever it takes to get victory in your life over temptation is what he's advocating here. And a lot of these things, I believe, have to do a lot with who you hang out with. Proverbs 13 verse 20 says, a companion of wise men will be wise, but a companion of fools will be destroyed. Many of you know I follow the Detroit Lions, and I'm a fan for life. We just had a young player who was a first-round draft pick who was caught up in a big mess down in Florida, and the Lions cut him. He's no longer on the team. 2 years in to a 5-year control of his contract. Good player, still growing, still ascending. But he got hung up. He was hanging out with the wrong crowd. And it's just, you can't do it. You have to separate yourself from people who are going to drag you down. I learned that lesson as a teenager. That verse I quoted, Proverbs 13:20, I'd been a Christian for 13 days, reading a proverb a day, when I read that verse. And God told me I couldn't hang out at the south end of school anymore. For those of you who knew me then, you know, at our high school in Ionia, the south end of the school was off school property, and that's where everyone went to get high or smoke cigarettes. That's where they went. And as a Christian, I couldn't go down there anymore. I had to make new friends. And that's just what it takes. You have to separate yourself from the crowd that's going to influence you to make poor choices. And that's part of what Jesus is talking about here, about warning about offenses. In regards to children, you know, we live in a culture where the education system is set against Christianity from the time the kids are little. I mean, we're teaching evolution to kindergarten. You know, we evolved from slime, from nothing. The Big Bang, you know, there's no mention of God and creation, that we're fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God. And quite frankly, it's something that parents need to make sure we're teaching our children the truth. That's all I have for today. Don't take sin lightly. Don't wink at sin. Make sure that if you're struggling, listen, don't struggle alone. There are people that if there are people in your life that care for you, then don't isolate yourself. Reach out to them. Admit you have. That's the first sign of, or the first step toward recovery, is admitting you have a problem. So, have a great day. We'll see you again tomorrow.